Hello guys, Croftus here. Why did the engineers leave star maps leading us to LV-223 only to try to wipe us out when we finally reach there? There is no single official answer, but there are multiple theories on this topic. Some are backed by Ridley Scott himself, others by biblical references like Leviticus 223, and some by darkest interpretations of the clues in the movie. So let's go from the most widely accepted theories to the most obscure and terrifying answers about why engineers left maps to LV-223 on Earth. But before we begin, Merry Christmas to all my subscribers. I hope you're having a truly wonderful holiday season. I'm certainly rewatching one of my all-time favorite Christmas movies, Prometheus. Thank you for all your support this year, and special thank you to all my Patreon members. But going back to the topic of this video, let's first establish what is canon in the movie. Shaw and Holloway find the exact same constellation pattern in cave paintings and carvings from totally separate ancient cultures. They read them as a star map pointing to a specific moon in a distant system, LV-223. Then Weyland funds the Prometheus mission and they land on that moon, and that's when things go terribly wrong. According to the movie canon, LV-223 is the engineers' military or bioweapons installation where they store and test the black goo. What's also canon is that around 2000 years before 2093, the engineers were prepared to wipe out humanity using the deadly pathogen.
How long's it been dead?
2,000 years, give or take.
However, before they could launch the ship, the outbreak killed almost all of them. So by the time the humans arrive, only one engineer is left in the cryosleep. When the lone engineer is awakened, he doesn't welcome humans. Quite the opposite, he rips off David's head and immediately tries to launch a deadly ship carrying the pathogen towards Earth. So the invitation hypothesis is already questionable inside the story itself. Even one of the dumbest crew members, Fifield, questions whether it was actually an invitation. Therefore, the star maps are real, but their function is unclear. Are they invitation, warning, recall beacon, or something much darker? So let's explore all the theories on why engineers invited us to LV-223 only to launch a planet-killer ship. The mildest theory is that the star maps are warnings that humans misread. This is one of the most popular interpretations, and it lines up with what Scott hinted at. The engineers visited early human civilizations. Those encounters became myths, carvings, and cult symbols that got preserved as gods pointing to the sky. So the repeated star configuration drawn on cave walls wasn't an invitation. It translates as, that place is forbidden and dangerous, this is where gods bring judgment. However, over time, the original meaning of the maps is lost. So when Shaw and Holloway come along thousands of years later, they optimistically choose to interpret the pattern as an invitation. It's similar to old maps that say, "Here be dragons around dangerous seas." Also, the overall hostility of LV-223, like toxic atmosphere, monstrous biology, and violent storms, reinforces the idea that this is a kill zone, not a meeting point. However, the humans refuse to believe that until the moment when the engineer kills most of them. Although star map as a warning is a viable possibility, why leave this map to a species that doesn't even have space travel or any other possible means of reaching LV-223? Which leads us to the second theory that it could be that LV-223 is a judgment site or recall beacon. Another major theory is that LV-223 is a place of judgment that species are meant to reach once they become advanced enough to travel there. This theory lines up with Ridley Scott's comments. In an interview about Prometheus and the Alien Covenant, Scott said that engineers seed life on planets and then they revisit these worlds. If the civilization has gone wrong, violent, childish, or destroying their planet, they wipe the slate clean using the black goo. Therefore, engineers leave the LV-223 pattern with early humans as a kind of a cosmic address. Almost saying, if you become powerful enough to reach this place, we will reassess you. However, over thousands of years, humans become warlike, cruel, and toxic to their own planet. So around 2000 years ago, the engineers decide that we've failed the test and begin preparing a genocide mission from LV-223. The outbreak kills almost all of them before they can launch, so the last engineer in stasis is basically the unfinished executioner. So according to this theory, LV-223 is the place of judgment where the gods decide if you're allowed to keep existing. However, the Prometheus rabbit hole is truly bottomless, so if we go even deeper, we find the Space Jesus theory. This wild theory suggests that engineers initially left LV-223's star map as their address, but then became disappointed in humans, with the killing of Jesus being the last straw. The Space Jesus was the initial concept that Ridley Scott talked about briefly in an interview. Scott initially envisioned that the engineers sent one of their own to Earth to course-correct humanity from violence and corruption around 2000 years ago as a kind of emissary or savior. However, in the usual barbaric nature of humans, they crucified him for spreading love and compassion. That's when the engineers decided that humanity was a lost cause and needed to be wiped out. This explanation never fully became canon, but it's strongly implied within the story, especially given the timeline where the engineers prepped to destroy humanity about 2000 years ago. So this date lines up suspiciously with the crucifixion of Jesus. On top of that, Prometheus is actually a Christmas movie as the crew arrives to LV-223 on Christmas, and Yannick even puts the actual figurine of Jesus on the Christmas tree. Also, early Prometheus scripts directly mentioned that Jesus was the engineer emissary. So according to this theory, the star maps start out as a true invitation for a future relationship with our makers, but humanity's complete moral collapse flips the meaning. On the Empire Magazine podcast, Scott confirmed this idea. He said that when the engineers re-evaluated Earth, they saw the inhabitants killing each other, destroying the environment, and acting like children, so the space jockeys chose to wipe it clean.
If the planet went wrong, they would want to wipe it clean.
So again, the maps started as an actual invitation. But once we proved ourselves unclean and crucified Jesus, the same coordinates led to our execution. And that fits perfectly with the tone of the movie. Weyland sees the engineers as a potential immortality tech support, but from their side we look like a failed, unworthy experiment. But if we go even deeper, we discover the engineer civil war theory. Prometheus' deleted scene and beings on the planet 4 strongly imply that there are at least two factions of engineers that oppose each other. It could be that initially LV-223 belonged to a faction of creators that were benevolent toward humanity. However, eventually in the Civil War, LV-223 was taken over by the hostile faction of engineers that turned the moon into a military base. So the maps were initially an invitation, but the destination moon was taken over by hostile engineers. But now let's descend to the deepest layers of the abyss, where there is a theory that engineers practiced ritual sacrifice with humans being raw material. The very first scene of Prometheus shows an engineer drinking the black liquid, disintegrating and seeding a world with his DNA. Other elder engineers are watching, which signifies that this is a ritual sacrifice. The engineer temple on LV-223 glorifies a dark deity, a xenomorph whose birth requires a sacrifice of a host, implying that engineers could have been a demonic death cult. So in this context, the black goo is a creation-destruction tool tied to sacrificial rituals. Therefore, LV-223 may be the engineer's altar lab, where life is broken down and remixed into new forms. Humans were meant to be lured there willingly or by destiny as offerings or test subjects for the engineer's dark religion. Within this context, the star maps aren't a friendly invitation, they are the address of the slaughterhouse, meant to lure naive humans for the engineers' dark rituals. Engineers wanted humans to arrive without fear, joyfully anticipating meeting their god, only to be sacrificed and to reincarnate their demonic xenomorph deities. So in a sense, humans were lambs led to a slaughter, deceived to believe in engineers' benevolence in order to be the most innocent hosts for the Xenos. These religious undertones lead us to the biblical interpretation of the LV-223 and Leviticus 22:3 connection. LV-223 is a very strange name for a planet, therefore it's widely believed to be a reference to Leviticus 22:3 from the Bible, and this is what the verse reads. For generations to come, if any of your descendants is ceremonially unclean and yet comes near the sacred offerings that the Israelites consecrate to the Lord, that person must be cut off from my presence. I am the Lord. This verse is eerily close to the situation in Prometheus. LV-223 appears to be a holy place for the engineers, a restricted zone, the engineers' lab for their sacred offerings, and the deacon. Their temple contains the life-transforming black goo, the building blocks of life and death. But humanity shows up unclean, morally and spiritually, and literally contaminating the site, as Chauvin says that the temple is reacting to their presence. Therefore, the surviving engineer's reaction, violent removal, and attempted genocide is a cinematic version of "cut off from my presence" from the verse. If we take the Leviticus link seriously, LV-223 isn't just a random code. It's a biblical reference that this place is about approaching sacred things while unclean, and a direct pointer to the theme of judgment for trespassing into God-level power. That's exactly what Weyland does. He breaks into the throne room of gods, demanding the forbidden fruit, eternal life. And this leads us to the deepest layer of the abyss, where lies another theory connecting LV-223 maps to the Garden of Eden. According to this theory, maps to LV-223 are the cosmic metaphor of the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden. They are the engineer's version of the forbidden fruit, a deliberate temptation placed before humanity's eyes to test whether we would try to seize godlike knowledge. In the Garden of Eden, the tree of knowledge isn't hidden, it's placed in the center of the garden, fully visible, intentionally accessible. Its purpose is not simply to be avoided, but to reveal whether humanity will respect the boundaries set by its creators. It appears that the engineers have done exactly the same. By embedding maps to LV-223 across thousands of years and cultures, they left a symbol within easy reach. A cosmic riddle designed to provoke curiosity. The purpose was to see whether humanity would choose to go where only gods should tread. Just like Adam and Eve reached for the fruit to become as gods, humans also pursued the LV-223 destination in search of answers, power, and even immortality. Weyland's entire mission reflects this desire to break the natural order. Shaw and Holloway interpret the map as an open invitation, but it could actually be a moral boundary left to see if humanity would obey or succumb to temptation. So when humans arrive at the LV-223 temple, they have effectively eaten the forbidden fruit. So the engineer's violent reaction mirrors the divine judgment. Humanity has crossed into sacred knowledge without permission. Therefore, the maps function as a test of will and restraint, and humanity, just like in Eden, ultimately fails. In the end, the mystery of why the engineers left star maps to LV-223 remains one of Prometheus' most haunting questions. The warning theory frames the maps as the ancient danger sign that humanity tragically misread. According to the judgment site theory, LV-223 is a cosmic checkpoint, a destination species must reach only after gaining the power to be evaluated, and if necessary, erased. Then there is the Space Jesus interpretation that suggests that the maps were initially a genuine invitation, but then they became humanity's death sentence after our moral collapse 2000 years ago. The engineer civil war theory suggests various factions of engineers with opposing intentions towards humanity. The darkest theory is the ritual sacrifice theory that turns the maps into a bait, luring humans to a laboratory, a slaughterhouse temple where humans are subject to demonic rituals. And then there are the biblical parallels from Leviticus 22:3 to the Garden of Eden that imply that the maps were never directions at all, but a test of purity, obedience, and restraint. But what do you guys think? Why do you think engineers left these maps to LV-223 only to launch the deadly pathogen towards Earth once we reach there? Thank you guys for watching. Leave your thoughts in the comments about this topic, and don't forget to join the Patreon for extra support. And special thank you to those who already joined. Also, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Croft, and I'll see you in the next video.